Hey John, good evening.
Cris, how you doing?
I'm doing well tonight, and yourself? Toronto is
Yeah,
great.
Toronto is great. Toronto is kind of muggy at the moment.
Yeah,
It's
it was a bit of
lovely
a
and warm,
hazy.
but a bit
Yeah,
hazy. Yeah,
it was crazy today. I was walking in the city, and it was so humid. It's incredible the weather today and in the past days. I have plants here in the balcony. I have to water them every day, basically. But
I'll tell you
yeah,
what though,
so
I have a commute. I have to boast about this a little bit. My commute to work is a 10-minute cycle through a lovely kind of part of Queen's Park where the flowers are really out at the moment, and the gardens are nicely kept, and it's sunny in the morning, and it just makes me smile. So
yeah,
I'm just going to boast about that for as long as I can while the weather's still good.
yeah, the perks of living in downtown Toronto, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm excited by the podcast today. We have great guests, key opinion leaders in neurotech. We have Kyle Mathewson from Blueberry. We have Alex Nee from Divergence Neuro. I'm really excited by the guests tonight. And yeah, so what do you think? Is this kind of a typical evening that we used to have also in the previous hackathon or the previous event on NeuroTechX, or is this a bit different from? Because I remember your first, when was your first NeuroTechX event?
Oh, that's a good question. So there was one event that really kind of kicked things off for me. It was in 2016, I think, 15,
Yeah.
16. It was a brain hack that we have. We have a bunch of brain hacks in Toronto every maybe 1 to 2 a year. And it's generally a kind of neuroimaging contingent and a kind of neurohacker EEG contingent. Those are
Yeah.
the two core groups. And they really kind of came together around about 2015, and yeah, that was kind of how it kicked off for
Wow.
me, and I've been pretty involved ever since.
Like 6 years ago already. Wow.
Yeah,
When did we get to know each other? It's one of these events. I think it was the year in review from 2019 or 18.
yeah, we had you as a speaker at a symposium that we had, um,
Camage.
and yes,
Yeah, I remember that. Oh,
our industry
yeah.
representative.
Yeah, I think there was Graham Moffat was there. I think there was April Kadimi and the representative manager of Kabi, I think.
Hmm.
Leong, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was a great panel. It was also about industry and academia synergies, right? A little bit like this season, this series that we are launching today.
That's been a real
Um,
theme, like I think
yeah,
with and I think what we'll get to for everyone out there listening, what we'll get to contextualizing this series and the kind of NeuroTechX things that we're representing here is the two types of things that we talk about a lot are neurotech, funnily enough,
yeah,
techie things to do with hardware, software, algorithms, etc., and this curious thing in the academia industry relations.
yeah.
And we've had, I would say, like half the events we've done have been one of those, and half the events we've done have been the other.
It's super interesting. And there is intrinsic synergy that every academic and every neurotech scientist can exploit, but it's not really formalized and streamlined. So I think with this series, we try to expose what are the difficulties and a bottleneck to have these different worlds of industry and academia to speak with each other, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have fantastic guests during the series. And tonight we have people that were in academia, working with academics, working with professors and clinicians, but also developing their own startups. And I'm super excited by the contents tonight.
Yeah, yeah, same. Really looking forward to seeing. I know a lot about these guys. We're friends, but there's a lot that I don't know, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot tonight.
Yeah, and then it's in line with the pillars of the NeuroTechX community and, community, education, and innovation, which are the three pillars. And I'd like to share quickly the neurotechx.com site so that I can show a couple of features of the site on how to subscribe to the Slack channel, which is super nice, super important. So this is the site. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, looks good.
So
Slick
neurotechx.com.
website.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like the graphics.
Hmm.
So if you scroll down until you see the map, all the way down here, you see a button that you can click, and that allows you to subscribe to the Slack of NeuroTechX. And with that, you have free access to all the features, to all the channels. There is also a job community where to find jobs. There is a site page that prompts you to hardware, the hardware hub, so-called, so that you can purchase hardware for a low cost. It's really full of features, so I strongly recommend that.
Yeah, and the Slack, I think the Slack deserves a special mention. There's a lot of things that deserve a special mention, but the Slack as a resource, right? There's whoever you are, if you're a student, scientist, industry professional, amateur, general enthusiast, you have ideas, you have questions, you have new ideas, you have a product, you have some kind of scientific, activity. Dump it on there, and you will get loads and loads of interest and loads of feedback, and typically some new information comes back through. That's always been my experience, and I think the numbers on their active users has got to be well up in the thousands, right? So it's a lot of eyes on that Slack these days.
It's an amazing community, and everybody help each other. And I see while you were speaking that you are moving your hands. You have some NeuroTech instrument on your finger, right? So.
Yep, Aura ring.
Yeah,
the Aura is super slick. I mean, it is honestly the most impressive wearable device I've encountered. I got it because I lost my wedding ring, and my wife makes fun of me because she's like, "Man tech, like, don't just get a replacement. Get a replacement that has a microchip in it."
That's amazing.
But yeah, I'm pulling the data. I'm analyzing my sleep. I'm trying to get over how bad my sleep patterns are, but quantifying myself.
That's in the spirit. And for all the neurotech couples, you can present each other the Aura ring, right?
That's a thought. Yeah,
that's a thought, right, for the community. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to start the meeting. Bonsoir, good evening. In the spirit of NeuroTechX, we want to welcome people to the first event of the series, focused around the theme of industrial and academic synergistic work, and in specific Canadian realities. Canada and Toronto, in specific for what we know here as chapter leaders of NeuroTechX, is thriving with neurotechnological initiatives and products and research and clinic work and trials. And in this episode, I have the honor and pleasure to speak with two leaders in the realm of neuroscience, which are Kyle Mathewson from Blueberry, he's a chief scientist at Blueberry, and Alex Nee, who is CEO at Divergence Neuro. So I'd like to invite on screen already Kyle. Let me see. Hi, Kyle.
Good evening, Kyle.
Hi, John. Hi, Chris.
How are you today?
Pretty good. How about you guys?
Fantastic.
Yeah, pretty good. So you're on brand already, Kyle, as I can see.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've got my device attached to my glasses right here.
Sounds good. Looks slick.
Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to start with a short overview about AFners in general, and then jump into some of the stuff we've been doing at Blueberry to make it more portable and accessible for everyone. I work at the University of Alberta as well, and run a lab where I use portable technology to image the human brain. So as many of you know, light is modulated by our brain activity in a number of ways, and the two major ones are that the blood acts as an absorber of light, and so you can have kind of a shadowing effect when you're using a particular brain area a lot, where there'll be an increase in blood and decrease in light transmission through that area. There's also changes in the scattering of light, which occur more simultaneously with neural activity, which I won't talk as much about today, and which are smaller in size and not measurable with some of the technologies we'll talk about today as well. But mostly today we'll talk about the fNIRS signal of blood, which is a slower signal that associated with like 6 or 7 seconds after neural activity. The reason that we're able to measure brain activity using light is because there's kind of a transparency in a particular spectrum of colors of our tissue. So the melanin and water create this little window in the red and infrared range, which allows light to transmit through, which is why we all appear particular shades of light and dark pink. And so you can use light to measure ongoing changes in these molecules by measuring absorption at a number of different wavelengths. And usually it's 2 or 3 wavelengths. And you select wavelengths on either side of this crossover point between the absorption spectra of oxy and deoxyhemoglobin, and you use some matrix algebra to solve for the amount of oxy and deoxyhemoglobin given the measured light and the incident light. So you can create kind of arrays of these light sources and light detectors and recreate the path that the light that you measure at a detector likely took to get from the light source to that detector. And you can use these recreated light paths to create 2D or even 3D maps of brain activity, in this case of blood flow in a visual task. So here's a good example of kind of state-of-the-art retinotopic mapping from the University of Washington in St. Louis using fNIRS arrays of sensors. You may have heard of the 3 different kind of types of fNIRS. There's the continuous wave light, which it just shines in light continuously and measures the absorption of that light, which is what our device, the Blueberry, is, and what many of the lower cost devices out there for research and consumers are. And then there's higher end devices that modulate the light in the frequency domain to estimate more features of the, not just the absorption, but the scattering of light through the tissue. So here's a new system we just got at Alberta before the virus that we're eager to use. And you've all likely seen the brand new technology from Kernel, which involves a time domain fNIRS, in which pulses of light are shined in and the whole distribution of photons arriving at the detector is measured. And the shape and height and delay of this distribution is used to infer things both about the absorption and the scattering.
Is this Lex Friedman and Brian Johnson on the picture?
This is Lex Friedman and Brian Johnson on cool. Lex's podcast, which you can listen to a nice talk from Brian about their technology.
Terrific.
And we're
Yeah, I would have loved an N back, I have to say, rather than just that jokes thing they did. Just my kind of geeky preference.
So you can see that there's a push to minimize the size, and as our technology advances, you can see that this technology is going to be more and more portable. So here's a system on the right, which is portable enough to be taken up on mountains, and there's kind of a cutting edge technology from material science on the left, showing kind of how flexible and tiny these things could become from the lab at Northwestern.
It's really tiny.
So at Blueberry, we want to continue this miniaturization of the technology to help people to understand their mind and body. We have a tiny fNIRS chip that can slip onto glasses or headphones. Here it is attached to my Oakley glasses. This measures the ongoing blood in the left temporal lobe by measuring the light transmission through the head, and gives you an indication of both your heart rate and also your mental activity in real time. And we give people feedback in a number of ways about their mental state. So the basic strategy is kind of this miniature design and nice applications on the phone and web to interact with it. So we have here, this device is streaming live to my phone, which is the Bluetooth connection. In this case is between my device and the phone. And then from the phone, it can transmit on to our web app and into our database so that we can use, for instance, our machine learning models that we're developing to rate people's cognitive states and give them feedback.
Really cool. And that measures blood volume, right?
It measures the amount of blood in that area relative to kind of previous times during that day or previous days. Yes.
Amazing. And
so once it's measured with a Bluetooth connection to a phone, then we can pass on to web applications. So here's my live data being transmitted into our dashboard. So through the dashboard, you can see that we can then apply machine learning models to estimate things like stress or mental activity. Here was my kind of stress peaking up when we were preparing the sound check earlier today. And then you can see as I've gotten ready to give the talk here and started talking, it's gone up again.
Yeah.
And this dashboard, you can see, has an advanced mode as well with a little bit more features, but it can do things like speech recognition as well. I can apply one of our machine learning models right now, and it can estimate kind of one of our models estimates what stage of a conversation you're at.
And you have 3 states that you're mostly classifying, right? Low, normal flow, and high flow.
Yeah, so we have a number of models running at any given time. For instance, this conversation model is kind of orthogonal to this mental state, which is what we call mental load here. And then we also have a new model that's estimating people's stress that we've been building. So that's what I'm plotting. That's what we're plotting here on the web app. Let's see if I can go back here. Yeah. So because we wanted to talk about these kind of links between industry and academia, I wanted to show an example of how, coming from academia, I maybe have a different perspective on the goals for our software product and what it's going to look like. Here's an example of something we've been working on this summer, where we're trying to kind of solve a lot of the problems I've run into using commercially available portable brain imaging systems. Kind of solve them all in one for the customer, in this case, the research customer. So you can see this yourself at science.blueberryx.com. We have kind of an all-in-one experiment that, in this case, I'm going to disconnect from my web app so that I can, I'm going to disconnect from my Android, and I'm going to connect instead through the web here to my device.
And this page is accessible also from the main site, blueberryx.com.
Yeah, there's a link from the main site. Let's hope this live demo works. The web Bluetooth is new technology that does seem to work pretty well. So here
it's pretty reliable, the web Bluetooth, I've found. Actually, it's surprisingly good.
Yeah, we're moving from focusing on kind of Python tools and APIs to maybe thinking about how we can provide a lot of those same tools over the web to people in a way more easily to deploy state. So here's an example. We got data streaming in from the side of my head, and show you kind of what it's like when the end user, as a researcher, thinks about design from the front end. So I'm going to calibrate the timing of this device by holding my Blueberry, taking it off and holding it actually physically up to the screen, like this.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to start a calibration, and the calibration, I think you can see, is going to flash impulse responses into the detector of the Blueberry. And it's going to synchronize the Bluetooth delay, and so that in the output file that's going to be created from this experiment, all the timing is adjusted for, and so it's the real life timing of when things are presented on the screen. Now we can move on to the second stage here, which is like a data quality check. So this will complete a basic kind of check of data quality that I might make fail if I talk too much.
Okay. It doesn't fail if we talk.
So that's now complete, and we can start an experiment So that same thing can be done once, and then you can run this experiment over and over again, where a user has to kind of mouse or touch screen around and grab this circle as fast as they can. And at the end of this, an output file will be saved, CSV file, which is identical for every participant, except for it's their own data. Oh my God, this is such a hard one. This is a dangerous thing to do during the talk. And so the manipulation here is that this task gets much harder halfway through. Oh. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I guess there's more the diameter, the harder it is. So you're gonna supposed to see some increase in blood flow.
So here you can see the output file. We're thinking about things like what should be in the triggers instead of just a number that you have to come up with 1 to 255. We have this kind of nice strings of triggers that you can turn into Python dictionaries of all the information and your reaction time. Maybe you can't see this, but it's all maybe right here. The mouse position, distance from the center. So we want to think about how we can kind of really set up the output files to make it easy for research users as well. I'll go back to the presentation here to finish.
What is the sampling frequency here, Kyle?
I think it's great question. It's something like 20 hertz or something like that. It's a couple times a second. Because it doesn't have, no, it's fast enough to measure a heart rate. So it's, yeah, okay. 25 hertz, I want to say.
We do have another question coming from the audience very quickly. If you can take it, Kyle.
Please.
Actually, that one's coming from me, and I think that one can come in at the end, because I think rather than interrupt Kyle right now. All right. So we'll come back to that one.
Okay. I wanted to show we deployed this and had Olaf Krigelson's group at Victoria run a couple participants through it to kind of see what it would be like to send this to a researcher, have them collect data. Each person did 6 blocks like I just did. On the left, I'm showing just a quick script that can pull out the reaction time for each of those participants to show that the behavioral manipulation is working. And then for one of those participants, this is like the already processed fNIRS signal. So this is the kind of difference between oxy and deoxyhemoglobin, correcting the short channel for the long channel, all these pre-processing steps. At 0 is when the difficult version started, and you can see this kind of increase in the, an increase in the difference between oxy and deoxy, all these lines going down.
All right, and the different colors are the different participants?
Yeah, this one is 6 blocks from one of the participants. So
all right,
showing reliability over their 6 blocks.
And
so
on the first panel, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The first panel on the left, the y-axis is milliseconds, right? Reaction time.
Yeah.
And the second one, the y-axis is arbitrary units, I guess, intensity of the signal difference.
Yeah, and I'm sorry they're not labeled. This is like a hot off the presses data. That's how I like to show my hot off the presses data with no axis labels. So that
I got you. Don't worry.
It's great to have hot off the press.
But yeah, so we have some other ideas for how to make things really interesting for researchers that I could get into, like camera synchronization and GPS synchronization.
Wow.
But ask about those things if you like. I want to stop there though, and thank you guys so much for having me and for starting this great series, which I think is going to be well received.
Absolutely, and thanks, Kyle. This was a great presentation, very clear. John, are we ready to take questions? You want to start with yours, and can I click on the button and you ask it?
Click on the button. So, Kyle, this was kind of, I came in maybe first third the way through when you were on the AFners background, and you guys are using LEDs as light sources, and other systems use lasers. So, can you comment on some of the kind of physics and physiology, and particularly the miniaturization considerations?
Sure. Oh, could you comment on the use of LEDs versus lasers? Oh, that's your question. Okay. So like this system I'm showing in the picture here, maybe I can stop screen sharing. The system I showed in the picture is a laser-based system that cost 3 orders of magnitude more than Blueberry. And so the trade-off of LED versus laser, one of them is cost. I think there's another trade-off is power. So to make a portable system, you want to minimize power consumption as much as you can. One negative trade-off is that laser is like co-eliminated light or whatever you call it. It's light that's already going in a particular direction because of how it's generated. Whereas the LED, I think, is generating light kind of, maybe it's in that 180 degree arc around it. But we can do some things to try to focus that light in a direction towards the human body to kind of mitigate that trade-off. And there are miniature lasers you can get now too, so that's a good direction that I'm sure people are working on, that you can get those low, like for instance in kernel they have these laser sources that are USB-C powered. They have a huge amount of power they're drawing over that USB-C, but they're able to do it with one cable.
I guess maybe you wouldn't expect anytime soon the super mobile, super miniature end of the spectrum to be laser based.
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm here. Like I think that the lasers are coming.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
I have a comment from Josh Brewster that says that the LED versus laser is the price ratio of $15 diodes versus something way more expensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what is it $100 for the laser or something like that. But yeah, that's you can see the order of magnitude that this company that sells me for $500,000 a system versus Kernel that's trying to do kind of less than 10,000 versus us that's trying to do less than 100 or less than 200. It's a really different decisions.
Interesting. We can take another 2 questions if we have time.
I want another quick comment on the last one is I know if there's like some random piece of hardware, Josh Brewster is going to know the cheapest version of it that can be bought.
He knows that they're coming though, I think too. That's why he just is waiting for the cheap sapphire lasers.
Right.
Because we're not putting enough light in if your goal is to put in as much light as you can without hurting someone.
Yeah, totally understandable. And then we have the issues of, a commercial product, which are, comfort, safety, temperature. These all has to be vetted and so on. I have a next question. Could this device be used to detect stroke or the risk of stroke, early detection of stroke, from Jason K?
Yeah, great idea. We are working in the stroke ambulance here at the University of Alberta right now with the Blueberry and with the Muse simultaneously. We have the ambulance that goes out to people, and as soon as they get in the ambulance, I don't know, it must not be as soon as, but sometime in that process, some researcher says that their job is important and they come and stick this device on and grab some quick data. So yeah, I think I was up until last year working from a position that I didn't care about the health translation of this technology, and to really make it work, we had to make it available at Best Buy for 20-year-olds that want to have fun with it. But I'm coming around to translating these technologies into the hospital and bedside after seeing how effective they can be, how easy it is to use compared to the clunky 1980s tech that our healthcare system has still. So I think it's super promising to use in these acute settings like ambulance or ER.
Amazing. And then, of course, this has to do with clinical trials, clinical validation, and insurance reimbursement schemes. And it's always a good idea to go that route for any commercial endeavor, right?
Right.
I do have a last question from Neda Rashidi, and she asks, well, she says, thanks for a great presentation, and then she asks, how do you remove the artifacts from the signal online?
Great question. That's the hard part. If you were looking at my data, you can see we don't remove them from the raw data. We're just streaming the raw data in. We are using some of them to our advantage. So like we have walk detection and chew detection and this kind of thing. So some of the artifacts are so big, and an eye movement artifact detection. We're noticing actually like mechanical eye movements artifacts from the musculature here. So first answer is that we're going to try to use them to our advantage, and then the second answer is that we're going to either filter them out like we can with the heartbeat, or use kind of more fancy techniques, but we're limited by the number of channels to using some kind of statistical techniques.
And I'm sure this will come up in the series a lot because a lot of the wearable device face the same challenges in terms of movements and artifacts. I don't know. I think we can take one or two more questions. What do you think?
Sure, I'm happy if anyone has any.
Yeah, Alfredo Arias is asking if you can extract emotional balance from the technology.
Yeah, our strategy is to be data-driven in these kind of questions. We can't answer them from a place of expertise, really, as much as we want to claim that we've been working all in the brain for 15 years. We don't know like the signature of emotion or stress. So we are using well-validated psychological measures. Like for stress, we use the perceived stress scale, and we're deploying them out to as many of our users as we can to take as many times as they can. And as their data is constantly streaming to the database, we tag it with these stress scale scores, for instance, or emotion scores if we were interested in building a model like that, which we are. And then we slowly kind of compile that data together and use it to build models that we might deploy from time to time. So the answer is yes, that's how we're going to do it. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a great answer. John, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I want to ask this question, and I understand the version of the answer, Kyle, that's like, sorry, IP, sorry, this is,
Oh,
you need to keep something secret.
I'm not very good at those. Okay.
No, but look, like the question is, I know, so something that a lot of us are familiar with, even though we might not know the full details, is that EEG, like a lot of EEG systems, Muse, other companies and products that do stuff with low channel count EEG. They generally take the power spectrum, they take some ratios between different parts of the power spectrum. Those are the data features that are used for certain types of things. We kind of all know that. Maybe there's a few other things, but I don't really know what the analog is for one channel or kind of low channel count fNIRS, as in, and I can imagine just off the top of my head, right? So kind of like signal variance, right? Like an amplitude difference, a frequency component, like a small number of things like that, 5 or so. I could imagine those kind of features being present. So what are the big feature types with
Sure.
that type of signal?
Yeah, so the signal looks like the same signal from your Oura Ring and my watch. It's the heartbeat over time. And you get a signal from every detector source pair. I think that's what you're asking. And so you have kind of this N channel by time data, just like EEG. The major component is a heart artifact, or if you want to call it artifact. But that's like what the Garmin watch is designed to measure, is that heart artifact. Then I think the other things you're asking are, can you look at what kind of aspects of that signal after that can you look at? We use a number of kind of, we've developed a number of tools to help users and researchers pre-process the data in kind of the traditional ways like you would do in the M&E toolbox. And so our pipeline is very similar to if you search like AFners processing M&E, which is something I was contributing to before working here. And
I didn't know you'd stopped. Oh, that's a shame. I appreciate it.
No, I am. No, sorry. I don't mean to say I stopped. And so the answer is that once you can filter out that heartbeat signal, and you get kind of a slowly varying signal. And that signal, you then also apply this Beer-Lambert law to the spectroscopy aspect, so that you estimate, instead of the red and infrared light, say the oxy and deoxyhemoglobin. And you use those oxy deoxyhemoglobin signals as your, like, that's my signal. That's the end of pre-processing.
And
sorry, Chris?
the M&E tool from Alexandre Granford is used with the general linear model regression of the heartbeat offline, so that you can get the smooth signal, like you say, and then you transform these light raw signals into a physiological signal, which is a derivative of the two raw data, and then you take it from there as to measure blood flow, physiological data.
Yeah, and that's about, when I showed you the squiggly lines before, that's about what we had done.
Understood.
And in the frequency domain, you could imagine that signal would be different if someone was really active than if they weren't. It may be in the low and yeah, there's a lot of research that shows, like, if you look at the low frequency variation of a signal, it's a good estimate of cognitive activity.
Sounds great. I would say, do you have other questions, John?
Nothing burning. I mean, I could ask questions all night, but
yeah, well,
we don't have
maybe
all night.
Let's keep it for the general discussion at the end of Alex's presentation. So, Kyle, thanks so much. Please stop by also until the end of the event tonight, and please ask questions as well. I'm gonna resume your video for the general discussion so that you can ask questions to each other with Alex, with the other guests. But at the moment, I would like to invite Alex to give his presentation. So, Kyle, that was terrific.
Yeah,
thanks again for your presentation.
Okay. Terrific, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, let me invite Alex.
While Alex is coming up, you sounded pretty familiar with the M&E AFners stuff, Chris. I didn't know that was something you dabbled in.
I dabbled with M&E at some point.
Right.
In my MEG times. And
of course.
Hey, Alex, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Alex.
Good. Yourself?
So many familiar faces here. It's great to be here tonight. Thanks.
Yeah. It's
so, Alex,
audience.
you're calling in from Divergence Neuro downtown offices.
That's right, new headquarters. Yeah. We're located right in the heart of the downtown Toronto bioinnovation sector. So we're right beside Princess Margaret and Mars, of course, at 123 Edwards. We just got our brand new office set up with a lot of space and a lot of toys to play. So exciting to hear Kyle's talk. I'm really excited to put an order in, get a couple of fNIRS devices to play with, and yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
I see you're toyed up as well, and it's kind of subtle. I didn't catch it initially, but I see some toy there on your head.
Yes, I do. I decided to wear our toy of choice. Of course, just a little bit of explanation there. We are not a hardware company, but this is our one of our partners that we've chosen to go with in terms of a nice dry wireless EEG headset that covers a decent amount of channels for doing what we're doing, which I'm excited to share with you.
Excellent. So you want to share your message?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Yeah. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. That was a hard presentation to follow up. I marveled, like speechless with what Kyle and his team has developed, and wow, what a great age we live in with miniaturization of devices. We used to think about biometric device collection. We used to think, lab grade, be it fNIRS or EEG or other modalities of scanning devices. It used to be something that is reserved for clinics, and it's so encouraging to see so many new devices coming out. Smaller, cooler, with machine learning, AI, driving them from low cost, right? And it's just super exciting. And I was super happy to see Kyle's presentation and Blueberry team's working on. Of course, you can't go wrong when you have Dr. Steve Mann's guidance, in terms of, this community here. And oh my God, I can't wait to play with one. So I'm about to present something that's slightly different and, and so sort of connected to devices in a very versatile way, but from a different angle. So Divergence is a software company which integrates with multiple different devices, mostly EEG collection devices, and we utilize cloud and mobility. The reason that we exist is really because during the pandemic, we're noticing a huge rise of mental health cases, whether it's anxiety disorder, depressive disorder. You can see there's NHIS graph that I've cited over research earlier this year. So it went up from 11% collective anxiety, depressive disorder from, I think, January to June 2019 versus January 2021, which is at 41%. So now this is a very crude survey. It's not by any means comprehensive, but it kind of gives you a scale of magnitude of how much worse the problem is getting as everyone's been constrained by the pandemic one way or another in terms of social activities and feeling completely disconnected from our communities. And really, you see this problem exacerbating in terms of struggling with mental health, going completely into an alarming kind of territory. And also, taking a look at the tools that exist today, we're sort of caught between surveys that are completely narrative as per DSM-5, and some of the techniques are sort of more clinical laboratory driven. So right here you can see a EEG device that's from sort of the golden era of EEG in clinical neurology or neuroscience, where you literally have to sit in the chair with wires coming out of your head and then gel and paste and so on and so forth, right? So some of these techniques are super useful, but because of accessibility, because it does require patient to go to a clinic with very expensive tools and specific training, it makes it very much inaccessible in a way that would help. So there's never been a stronger need for user-friendly, scientifically validated tool set in terms of focusing on mental health in today's day and age. So that's why we're actually born in the pits of pandemic in October 2020. So we're really here to kind of figure out what's the friendliest way to understand and improve your brain. So that's sort of our overarching value proposition, was kind of looking at how to enhance mental health and cognitive performance of the individuals through affordable and friendly care and friendly technology, right? So, I think there was mention to Muse, and I want to pay the homage to Muse being the sort of first kind of dry wireless EEG sensor system. Of course, coming from the same proud heritage of Toronto neurotech community, it's incredible that it really opened this era of dry wireless EEG sensors and machine learning, and AI, and cloud. And really, we wanted to kind of go into the same space and really kind of carry the work and understand how we can take this with more comprehensive view to the next step. So firstly, we really focus on a software. We're a cloud-based platform that collects patient measurements, really focusing on using EEG as a quantitative modality of measurements combined with techniques of neurofeedback and neuroassessment modalities that are being practiced and have been practiced for the last 30 years or so in a clinical sense. And we're really creating this sort of engagement platform that contains EEG-based assessment, treatment delivery platform, which we'll go into a little bit, cognitive assessment platform in way of questionnaires. And traditional format, third-party integrations with devices or other tools, and research in terms of machine learning and model building, which I'll go into a little bit as well. So we're kind of this very multifaceted group of neuro nerds and hackers that really want to focus on research and use research drive development of product in a way that is based on science and based on good engineering, right? So we have a lot of pioneers coming before us that has inspired us for generations, and we're proud to be here and carry on that work, really. So we're continuous researching and development to improve predictive model for neuro health in terms of not just a neurofeedback-based diagnosis, but overall mental health diagnosis using QEEG as a model, leading to sort of prescriptive care, right? So how does this really help? There's a lot of buzzwords. So really, we summarize this as a 5 process in terms of patient journey. We provide assessment using EEG as a baseline, right? To baseline the neuro activities, neurocortical activities, to compare that to a normative database and really try to figure out what are the probability distribution that the patient may have different kind of phenotypes as it relates to validated gold standard database of different diagnosis, so we can give that sort of quantitative help, so to speak, instead of relying purely on just questionnaire data and completely subjective assessments as per DSM. We really are looking at using QEEG based assessment to augment that framework.
Alex,
and then
this is all the journey is all within the realm of the business model, or is this a journey of raw data measurement online to close the loop as a feedback?
Yeah, it's this is more of a business sense of what we're trying to explain. How does our platform accomplish, and how does it help the individual in question, which is the patient here, as they go through different parts of their journey of mental health care, right? So it's really more focused on the patient journey, which I don't think there's enough focusing on at the moment in the traditional framework. So moving on to treatment, you're welcome. So we our platform develops, enables therapists to develop program based on specific needs, both in terms of neurofeedback, but also in terms of traditional qualitative therapy and questionnaires based kind of engagement. So really enables that care of delivery for treatment remotely, from a browser to somebody's smartphone, end to end, and enables practitioners to be able to monitor and deliver feedback to their clients, and being able to monitor what their clients are actually going through, how they're tracking through the programs, and whether or not their thresholds are still realistic as they're going through the treatment programs. As the data starts to be collected, we're also developing intelligent session tracking based workflow to help therapists and client track progress and guide them through their journey of a particular therapy. So we created basically user-friendly guides through the user experience. And last but not least, we used analytics collected from various sessions to understand how we can recommend next steps better, whether it's in the form of threshold adjustments, different programs, different protocols, or frequencies of care, or different kinds of therapy modalities that could be recommended. So that's overall how we see ourselves, playing the patient journey here in mental health.
I love this. I love this circular economy because it touches upon the different aspects of a clinical device, but also an interventional device. which is really important for this kind of technology. Not only do we strive as neurotechnologists to find that angle to have the clinical, approval of the technology, but most of the time subsidies and then investors, they will ask for the interventional, value of the product, which is extremely important to mention. Thanks, Alex.
100%. Yeah, thank you. How does it really work? So we're really looking at two aspects of the platform. There's the client-side facing application that's in the form of a mobile app. So this is a delivery platform of care, and also it collects insight from the patients as they kind of self-report subjectively, how they have felt before and after certain sessions, or in terms of daily check-in. So what this does is really integrates the quantitative care and measurement and the qualitative measurement and tracking together, and produce insights as 360 in terms of helping therapists to build a more comprehensive picture on how things are going. And for clinicians, this offers a way to deliver programs and get results right away, basically across the cloud, right? In a way that's secure, private, and performant and flexible. For the clinician-facing piece, there's an interface that basically allow the clinician to construct a program in terms of milestones and in terms of different kind of protocols. They can pick sites, channels, they can pick frequency bands, as we'll go into in a little bit, and then they can integrate with third-party tools like different headsets. We work with Neuroscience headset. It's a startup based out in New York. They've done a wonderful 8-channel headset, which I'm wearing right now. So I'll show it to you. And it's quite a wonderful device that we decided to partner with them. So this is an older generation, but it's mostly parietal and parietal anterior. And the latest generation crown has more occipital parietal coverage as well. So it enables us to do quite a lot of things in terms of the protocol, delivery, and measurement, right? So but we don't just work with one device company. Obviously, we want to create a collaborative environment whereby, people can bring their own device that are sort of major consumer devices, and we can plug that in through SDK of the device vendor, and then we can source EEG from there and enable delivery of different protocols in a way that's flexible and not locked in, right? So
on that note, Alex, I'm not necessarily asking for names here, but just to kind of ballpark how many devices of interest would you say are kind of in your field of view at the moment? Because the reason I ask is because there's just so much, as you indicated, there's just so much going on. There's your big kind of long-term kind of research-oriented and clinically oriented EEG manufacturers, many of which are coming out with these more like consumer-grade devices as well, and then you have the consumer electronics-oriented companies like Muse. So do you have like 3 to 5 on your radar, or are there like 25?
It's a great question. We want to play with all devices. No, I think that's a very salient question, and thank you, John. I think 3 to 5 will be fair for us to look at this moment. There's still work to do when it comes to integrating with the device, right? So, assuming the SDK is readily available, you still have to write data parsing protocol, EEG processing protocol to ingest EEG and create kind of a seamless experience in terms of your user actually turning on a device and integrating with our platform. So, it's not quite seamless as we wanted it yet, but it's fair to say I think at this point we're looking at 3 to 5 devices that would be integrated within the next year. So we looked at the next 2 target devices. We're in the middle of actually integrating with them. They're, one is an 8-channel device, one's a 16-channel device. So really what we're hoping for is qualifying these devices in terms of not only just form factor or popularity, but also electrophysical characters and quality of signal. So we have developed a fairly comprehensive set of vetting standard in terms of digital resolution, offset, in terms of noise level, in terms of common mode rejection ratio, as well, different style of filtering in terms of both hardware and software. So I think Kyle mentioned Olaf Krigerson before, and we're actually very happy to just announced a Mathewson engagement with Olaf Krigerson lab. There's a couple key players there has been, in this industry for a very, very long time, and very skilled researchers and scientists when it comes to EEG data analysis and EEG data qualification. So we're happy to announce that we are, building an open source project that will be focused on data quality for various devices. But of course, there are a lot of devices out there, so we do have a selecting criteria that's based on certain channel configuration, quality of signals. We prefer dry wireless EEG for obvious reasons, and a certain price level which can sort of be accessible and affordable for most people, right? So that's kind of the
super interesting. That's such a good idea to try and actually nail down some objective some industry standards, right, for signal quality, because those don't exist. We all know this.
Really. I think every device vendor likes to tout their signal quality processes, whether it's buying expensive phantoms or using signal generator, doing white box testing or comparative testing.
Yeah, and that's the difference between research and then clinicians, right? If you had to do the whole pipeline that is put into place by universities versus the practice of a clinician, that's a completely different setup, right?
100%.
Yeah, so that's what we appreciate about differences between academia and industry.
100%. Yeah. So we really want to encourage those kind of collaborations, and I think that the Krigerson lab is doing incredible work, in terms of bringing the science down to the industry and using the scientific framework to guide us in terms of what is good data and what is noise, right? So proliferating and democratizing that knowledge can only be good when it comes to creating products that actually work.
I do have a question. Do you take questions now, or you want to wait at the end of the presentation?
Well, I'm okay to entertain one more here, but I'd like to move on because there's quite a bit more to kind of cover in terms of what we actually do and how we do it. But yeah, sure, one more is good.
Well, then yeah, I guess we can leave the question to the end, and then please go ahead.
Okay, well, as you please. So we focus quite a bit on neurofeedback as a system, because we've looked at various research generations in neurofeedback, and they do generate quite impressive results. We do look at the market of therapists, which is a small segment, sadly, still today that utilizes neurofeedback as part of their psychological counseling practice, right? So most counselors are more sort of CBT, DBT based. There's, Gestalt, there's different kind of, more narratively based counseling. So also this neurofeedback is still a smaller contingent, and mostly because of the cost and complexity of the current system. So the way it works in a nutshell is you have stimulation strategies. You can think of these things as kind of evoke response potential experiments where you are exposing your subject to different kind of stimuli, be it visual, auditory, or both, and at the same time measuring their brainwave. So you're setting up these thresholds that are, mostly spectra driven, right? So you can say, well, what does it mean if my, PO3, PO4, O1, O2 surpasses this relative threshold of alpha? Means, I'm kind of entering the stage of tranquility or something else, versus, if I have a singulate beta that's exceeding a certain percentage of spectral power, what does that mean? So on and so forth. So basically, it has required a wired traditional EEG system that required a large amplifier box and fairly clunky, sophisticated setup that is not, sort of mobile or wallet friendly, I guess, in a sense. It inhibited a lot of therapists being able to look into this and say, hey, if I want to get into more neuro-based therapy, I've got to shell out $20,000 plus X thousand dollars, a license for my, Windows monolithic application that runs on my PC, and patient has to come to me one at a time, right? So that's kind of the current state of the market by and large.
Absurd. And I think it's a third. If what's important is data, I think having so much to spend for hardware is really absurd.
Well, it's really what we observe in clinical sort of therapeutic device market, in the sense that it's just starting to see a lot of these wonderful devices like Blueberry coming out of the sea in recent few years, and we've observed this increase of viable devices, which really calls for the need of a change for software ecosystem and cloud ecosystem to couple with it, right? So devices on their own are wonderful, but if you're looking at the device in a myopic sense and say, well, it can only do this one thing, then it kind of limits the amount of imagination you can apply to, okay, what if I was able to get access to EEG for this device? I can use it to create different kind of applications, which really democratizes care. In the end of the day, I think that's what matters more. It's not so much just how many devices you can sell or so on. Looking at some of the real life example, this is a Brainmaster system, which is a classic EEG amplifier. I think it's 19-channel 1020 montage, right? So you can see that. Yeah, this is I think a $4,000 laptop that has a NVIDIA 1060 just to drive it, because it's so massively computational intense, and it's a wonderful software once you learn to master it, and it's clinical grade basically. So patients come to therapists to use the system, and they get a benefit during the session, but it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to set up. Out of the hour you're paying for, just typically anywhere between $150 to $200. You're paying about, I don't know, a third of that, so $50 just to set up an EEG cap, which is quite astounding, right? So, and you can see an actual example here of where that's been applied, and it's, obviously not the most mobile friendly and sort of at home use solution, right? Nonetheless, that's the norm today. When we're talking about actual protocols, there's many ways you can configure your neurofeedback protocol. But when it comes to meditation, one of our partners, Neuro Meditation Institute, based in Eugene, Oregon, actually came up with a framework. I'm going to butcher this because I'm not a scientist and I'm just feeling awkward talking about this. But in a nutshell, it sort of goes down to 4 categories. So you're looking at either focus, mindfulness, quietness, and openness. So depending on sort of the different symptoms you're working on, improving, focus works for, mostly ADHD patients that are, overactivated in terms of cingulate, uses beta as a thresholding spectrum, and it basically looks at how beta reflects the control of your attention in prefrontal and frontal cortex. Mindfulness goes on theta, really focuses on people who have felt stress and anxiety, produces a calming effect, similar to quietness, which is really kind of a different approach to this, using spatial awareness, focusing on alpha, on sort of parietal occipital lobe. It sort of speaks to the disrupted sense of self, producing a calming effect, and then open heart. It's really about more looking at depression and relationship issues in terms of activating the embodiment on a gamma spectrum. So that's a higher spectrum. So in a nutshell, it sort of embodies this quintessential approach using spectral analysis to target different kind of observation and affects. And we deliver some of these protocols that are the brainchild of neuromeditation and Dr. Jeff Tarrant, who's a fairly famous author in this field. And we're happy to, we're lucky enough to be chosen as kind of one of the partners to deliver a lot of these protocols that are tried and true, that have been taught through 20 or so years experiences clinically for many patients using neurofeedback, right? So we're really kind of just the platform that helps deliver this in a more cost-effective and accessible way. So this is kind of our experience. You've seen the kind of standard experience, which is sort of monolithic and Windows driven. So our experience is a little different. So it's firstly all web driven. So we have protocol definition, construct. You can build a protocol very visually using a web app by pointing at the sites you want. This is a montage based on, I think, Neurosity Chrome. And you can look at, sort of the collected data after your patient's done a session and see what's going on here in terms of raw EEG. Of course, you've got your favorite filtering tools, and then you've got different statistics driven by these things called events, which is basically just a specific spectrum of interest, right? So you can have alpha, theta, gamma, and then, you've got your favorite PSD graph here, and then different kind of subjective assessment integrated as part of that. So from a client's point of view, you've got this very sort of simple and non-convoluted app where you kind of just guide them through, okay, what have you got to do now? So if I click into continue my session, it goes into kind of a session experience. This right here you can see is a screenshot of what's called a focus mind protocol, which is really kind of targeting more ADHD population. And when you go through the protocol, the Crown device actually siphons your brainwave and streams it securely directly to our cloud, and then we do the computation, and the experience here changes. So the volume gets louder and the fire actually grows bigger the more focused you become. So that's kind of the fundamental of neurofeedback. At the end of that session, of course, you get your kind of scorecard and see how you've done. Yeah, so it's a pretty simple experience.
And this is simple, not simplistic, right? Because you want to create an experience that delivers feedback in the neurofeedback section and intent, so that is easily understood by the audience, and it doesn't have to be a complex clinical protocol.
Yes, absolutely. And it really, for these kind of protocols, there's sort of more therapeutic meditation protocols that have been, developed on the sort of full montage or 16-channel, even 8-channel devices, but you can reduce them down to 8 to 4 channels sometimes, depending on the complexity of the protocol itself. Of course, the more channels you have, the more flexibility, but most of the meditation protocols could be done within 8 channels. And we found, again, something like the Crown has a sufficient site coverage in terms of covering most of these channels. We could effectively deliver these protocols on a platform.
The Crown being the device that you just showed you.
Of course, yes, this one over here. So, that's just one of the few devices that we're looking at. Well, we have integrated with this one, but we're looking at 3 or 4 more potentially within the next year to be integrated in the platform. So, aside from the platform, we also do research. So we have quite a few neuroscientists, 3 neuroscientists and 1 biomedical engineer on board on a scientific research team. So we are actively doing multiple research in terms of using EEG to build a biomarker predictive data model to validate drug treatment, specifically in the psychedelic therapy space, whereby we can really kind of look at different serotonergic responses in different spectrums when the brain undergoes psychedelic immersion, right? So this is kind of a paper that we cited from Imperial College. So it's Robin Carr Harris's team with Chris Timmerman being the first author, looking at some preliminary effects on DMT. So DMT being one of the most favorite, I guess, fast-acting tryptamines. It has the sort of pharmacokinetic property of disrupting intercortical connectivity in terms of hypercharging. So you can see that the Lempo-Zeff complexity hypercharges, undergoes, the effect of the tryptamine during a very short span, and then it kind of falls off a cliff. At the same time, your alpha completely gets eviscerated in the middle, and then gets pushed towards both sides in terms of spectrum. So you can see a lot of these effects that are highly reproducible, clean in terms of building a biomarker database towards the end of being able to monitor and assess what a patient's state is during psychedelic treatment. So in terms of building up the research, we have a team of scientists working on a paradigm whereby you can, collect raw EEG, goes through standard, EEG processing pipeline in terms of cleaning, filtering, epoching, so on and so forth. And then it goes into a biomarker engine whereby we use the raw data set, and then we use machine learning processes to train and adjust and come up with a trained model data set. And then this engine takes in clinical configuration parameters in terms of dosage, dosing, timing, and then it queries the process model to get prediction based on the just time information, and it produces some kind of prediction of how immersed or how effective the treatment is, using different biomarkers. And then after the treatment, you can query the patients for narrative information to validate that prediction, see if it's actually they're matched with their experiences. We use DSM, basically DSQ-9. We use different kind of subjective queries and questionnaires to basically understand the sensitivity and the felt sense during this experience. And then that data, of course, comes back to help adjust the raw data set and make the biomarker model more sensitive, right? So that's kind of the research work that we're doing with EEG data. Yeah. So what is really Divergence? We do a lot of things. One of my good friends, Heather, and the co-founder, who's sort of our on our science advisory board, she's a therapist and really into neurofeedback, once taught us the analogy, we're kind of the kitchen. So you can think of the platform itself as a kitchen, whereby the biomarker is a secret sauce or special sauce, which makes your meal taste really great. The therapists are like cooks, or researchers, or people who are using this tool set, and the headset and other tools are like utensils and protocols and know-how. Algorithms are like recipes. So when you combine all these together, you're really cooking something incredible, and you're delivering it to your guests, whichever, be them patients or clients or whomever you're serving. But quite essentially, we're trying to create an open kitchen where people can walk in, bring their tools, and really trying to create magic and jam with each other. That's kind of who we are, and as a company, that's our ethos. It's really open collaboration. So we're kind of here. We've launched our MVP platform. We've had several research contracts under our belt. We have multi-device SDK integration underway. We have live view and real protocols delivered, so you can download the app now from App Store, and you can sign up as a therapist to experience our Divergence platform for neurofeedback. Going forward, we're looking at incorporating full assessment using QEEG, Eslaretta-based kind of statistical inference engine and machine learning platform to deliver phenotypical assessments based on normative database and integration with 16-channel devices. We're also building recommendations and insights for treatments based on these sort of insights and databases going forward. So that's kind of where we're headed in terms of building up the ecosystem and the product. So our team has grown incredibly over the last 10 months. We started with a team of 4 really core members, and was an advisory board of 3, and then board members are 3. In Q1 we added 3 more, and in Q2 we've added 6 more members in operating team, and we're still continue to grow. So it's been pretty fun. It's been an incredible year. We have awesome people working on different things with us in terms of research and product, and we're looking toward to jam with this community, and so many familiar faces. I can't wait to personally see each other again and maybe have beers and hack stuff. Yeah. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alex. And I will ask you to stop sharing so that we can invite people on screen. This was an amazing presentation, and I think we're already full of questions. And I want to open it up to invite Kyle for Q&A, and then to open it up to the general discussion after you ask questions to each other. Let me first invite Kyle on screen.
I'm going to jump in on the first question while Kyle's coming in, if that's
Sure.
okay. So, Chris, if you want to go to the questions list, I have the second to last one. So, Alex, you were talking about protocols and recipes, actually, right? I really like the metaphor. In terms of protocols, there's one particular kind of thing I'm curious about, which is I've been thinking about this a lot recently, the last year or two. So long duration recordings, right? As opposed to the kind of things we're a bit more familiar with either with an experiment, a kind of classic ERP experiment, or indeed your typical, say, Muse app meditation sessions. They're normally about 10 minutes, right? Half an hour max. What about when you want to record for 5 hours, right? Like, it's a different kettle of fish, both in terms of the data processing, but also in terms of the paradigm design. Like, what's the ideal way of like structuring that session if you have control over what people are doing, or kind of partial control over what people are doing? The example specifically that I'm thinking of, and maybe you've thought about this too, is like therapy guided trips, right? So clinician guided psychedelic therapies, but things that are slow acting, right? So you go up, and it's kind of da and down over the course of a few hours. So that, I mean, I assume you're interested in characterizing EEG over that time course, but protocol design for those kind of longer sessions.
Yeah, I think 100%, John. I think there's quite a bit of nuance in terms of designing, longer protocols, notably above an hour with continuous EEG recording. We're actually working on quite a few of those on our research side. I think that the key thing to remember is that there's quite a number of things you're really not quite able to do in different stage of immersion, right? So I think when we look at protocols for the short acting ones, that are ERP based, such as neuromeditation, we're looking at quite engaging protocols where we're expecting the brain to respond by, the inputting of stimuli, whether that's sound or visual. I think for the longer, immersive trips, it tends to be quite a bit more passive. So we're sitting there listening really to how the brain changes, how the alpha changes, particularly on the parietal and occipital region, for instance, and how the lymphozyte complexity will oscillate, in terms of overall entropy. So you're looking at something that's a bit more passive for those protocols in terms of non-intervention, because when somebody's going through a trip, there really isn't a lot you want to do to kind of interfere with that subjective experience. Certainly, we don't recommend a lot of intervention or a lot of questionnaires, but from the EEG perspective, the gold standard still, sort of clinical relevance, 19-channel minimal devices. You want to measure, pretty much the entire brain on a 10/20 configuration. So that, minimum 19-channel, because there's a whole lot that we don't know about in terms of different substances. You rather collect as much as possible without, interfering with the experience, which is sort of where that nuance comes from. So you don't want something that's too intrusive or bulky, but you don't want something that's too underpowered either, because then you won't, possibly catch those deeper sort of responses. But yeah, it's very nuanced, and substance to substance differs, right? So it's a very interesting topic discussion for sure.
Do you think neurosity is acceptable for a multi-hour session?
Well, I think in certain circumstances, certainly, I think battery lasts quite a few hours. I've tried it myself, but it's not one device fits all, right? It kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's all about context. What are you trying to do? I think neurosity is great for BCI. Neurosity is great for occipital, parietal, temporal engagements. A lot of the neuro meditation protocols that are shorter span, like anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes, it's got a down pat, right? So, in fact, it's a very powerful device, but with that, I think there's, a consideration of battery time, whereby, when you jam in a 1.8 gigahertz, very powerful CPU, that tackles the battery time in a considerable way. So compared to other devices, would I use it for a multi-hour recording? Probably not necessarily. Would I use it for something that's very, decisive and fast acting? Absolutely.
Because that space has been, solved. I guess the solutions are coming from the sleep-oriented innovations, right? Because that's the classic multi-hour long duration recording that is passive, but also has its nuances in terms of signal quality and tossing and turning and all of that. It's interesting to think about what you can take from the EEG systems that have been kind of customized for a sleep context into something that's in between 10-minute meditation and 8-hour night sleep.
Yeah, and I think that's where machine learning comes in handy. And you're building an inference engine whereby you can sort of look at segments of active measurement and infer quality of sleep, where you might not have to measure the entire duration of sleep to know, if there's signs of somebody sleeping poorly, right? So, I think it's difficult to look at the high end theta spindles along the midline, because you have to pace your sensors along the midline to go all the way into from shallow sleep all the way into REM. So it's difficult to do for any dry devices, because you can't get away with ambulatory noise when the person tosses and turns. There are dry wireless devices created. I haven't given it enough time to try them out to actually understand. Yeah, there's Muse-S, although I think they're targeting the same 4 channels as the classic, so FP sort of 1 and 2, and then I think it's T5, T6. Is that? Or
T3? No, more or less.
Kyle would know, I guess.
Well, I guess Kyle would know. I think it's a wonderful device. Again, it's very sleep friendly. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah, it's I think it'd be interesting to see the studies and kind of applications for sleep quality measuring using those devices, and combine that measurement with different protocols to improve sleep quality and do before and after, right? So
why don't we get Kyle's take on the same question, and we can back and forth a bit as well. So Kyle, like multi-hour protocols, or just something a little bit beyond a 10-minute meditation or a 10-minute ERP, like special interesting things in that domain from your experience?
Yeah, great question. It's so different from what we were told as a grad student. Our advisors were like, you got to record 3-minute blocks of data, because at any moment everything can break, and then at least you can have that 3-minute block of data. And so I think that, like, maybe thinking about it from that perspective is one good one, that if you can think about a 3-minute recording that's repeatable multiple times throughout that period, instead of your protocol has to be 8 hours of continuous data. If you're recording some kind of a 5-10 minute block repeatedly throughout, and maybe you have some neurofeedback protocol or stimulation protocol during that time. I like the idea of standardization of signal quality, but maybe this is alluding to an idea like standardization of task. And if we, instead of saying, I recorded a 3-minute resting and you did a 5-minute resting and they did a 10-minute resting and your eyes were open, and if there was like a protocol where we did the Toronto convention of the 3-minute recording from these channels.
I'm all over this. This is such a good idea right now, honestly.
Great idea.
Wow. I'm writing
Great candidate. Conference.
We should do it.
Standardized protocol.
And then some sort of kind of oddball or end-back versions. I think that there's some things I think Steve Luck was doing. He had a set of tasks that could elicit ERPs reliably. Maybe that gets to my question I had about your excellent talk, Alex, which is like when you get all these various cooks using their various utensils, and you want to have a database that has some commonalities across their meals, then how do you work at the time of like design of the protocol to make sure that your database is useful?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, Kyle. We start always with what we know and what's most researched and published, right? So among the classical neurofeedback, sort of theory, there are, a few categories, finite categories of protocols and standards that it pertains to specific observations as it pertains to ADHD, attention or felt sense, or a sense of quietness, tranquility, or focus. So the four major categories explained in terms of neuromeditation actually reflects on, I would say, 70–80% of issues that are treated on a day-to-day basis. So I think where we start is we presume that we don't know everything, and machine learning as a tool will start fishing out biomarkers in terms of commonalities, in terms of different kind of relations between different frequency bands, using crossband correlation observations, or different, subtle biomarkers in terms of how the lympho-ZEV complexity will correlate to specific band, as the person goes through a particular experience. So we start with something we know, and then we validate it with more and more data. So I think that the more powerful part of all this is once we open this up to the community, and I love the Toronto convention idea, because I think only through standardization, let's do, P300, civilly or privately, we can look at the P300 engagements with devices that have occipital or parietal occipital coverage, and really see where that falls through in terms of normative database. And this has been done by various industry leaders, by the way. Cambridge Neuroscience has a P300 database. ePrime has a P300 database, and several other sort of cognitive testing companies that make it their business to collect the normals, have these databases that you can actually leverage, right? So as a researcher, the tools are out there, and I think it'd be great to standardize these kind of baseline experiences and have people have one place they can come to.
Are they open? So you mentioned ePrime database or Cambridge Neuroscience databases. Are they open or they are proprietary?
As far as I know, those databases are proprietary. So I think it'd be interesting to conjecture kind of a more open database with sort of open source data.
Totally.
This has been attempted before. I think there's a eBrain concept that started quite a while ago with Muse platform. It was the NeuroTechX community. There has been an initiative with OBI in Ontario that attempts to build a kind of open source neurobiomarker database as well for things like epilepsy. I think that the things that you would need in place are accessible devices, fairly accessible cloud platforms that anyone can log into and contribute data in a secure, reliable way, without absorbing amount of sort of costs. So that will come with time. And I think from a research front, you can look at this as an open source initiative whereby people get together and contribute to these conventions and standardized tests, and really contribute data with multiple devices, and there will be a way that we can build this up. Right? It's a community effort.
What is amazing is that your business model provides the opportunity to have it open sourced, right? Which is quite unique, and yeah, I think we should keep an eye on this. I do have another couple of questions. One is from John, but I'd like to open it up for a free discussion where everybody can jump in and with qualified questions. So please, do you also have questions for Kyle?
Alex, I think.
Yeah.
Alex, do you have any questions for Kyle?
Oh yes, yes. I do. Sorry, I kind of blanked there. If I order the blueberry now, when would I get it? When would you ship? I'm really fascinated by it. I think I want to play with.
That's a great question. You're in Toronto?
I am, yes.
Yeah, I think that if you ordered a blueberry now, you could get one before the end of August in Toronto somewhere. But I have no idea at all about the hardware side of the company, or like what kind of lineup there is of other people that have been promised a blueberry. But from my perspective, there's nothing stopping you.
I think
Kyle,
you have
I thought you were going to say then
pre-orders.
for a second. I thought you were going to say before the end of the night.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
It's going to be about 200 meters down the road.
Probably.
Man Labs to where you are right now.
I'd imagine that John, our CEO, is listening right now, and that he saw the value of getting you one. Oh no, he just went off. Okay, yeah, yes, you're gonna get one soon.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna put my order in now. So that's my biggest question, and I just oh, it's amazing. How do you? So my second question is, how do you look at the efficacy? Using fNIRS. Sorry, I'm stumbling. Versus sort of like EEG based kind of techniques in terms of measuring focus and attention. You mentioned focus and attention being sort of two key things on your platform, and I think that's super valuable. I guess like how do you see how that compares to sort of EEG based?
Yeah, I think that it's not better or worse. It's a different kind of orthogonal tech and orthogonal set of kind of physiological changes that you can measure. You're measuring these like hemodynamic echoes of neural activity, and they might, for example, like there's going to be clear biomarkers downstream of the neural activity between the neurons firing and the blood being recruited to an area. So if you're just like data driven looking for biomarkers, this is a dipstick on a separate part of the physiological process. So I think that is one kind of data driven answer, but I think it's from an artifactual perspective, I don't have to worry about touching this. Like every device I've ever used before, the more I go like this, I have wooden tables. My office has like wooden tables. All of my lab has wooden tables. I don't have to worry about any of that. My concern is like the drapes in the room and the type of light noise I'm getting from other lights and stuff like that.
I see.
So different.
Super interesting. Who do you see being, this probably be a weird question, but like I'm gonna ask it anyway, just because I get you here in front of us. Who do you see as your main audience that would benefit from this technology? Like other than researchers, or I guess neuro nerds that like to tinker with devices as we do. Like
who do I think is going to be the main benefit of this technology? Yeah. I think that 3 years ago, I would have said, like, it's going to be truck drivers or fighter pilots or athletes or something that wasn't to do with a hospital. But I do think that it's going to be people that their physician wants to monitor their brain activity over the course of their life. Like my grandpa, when he got his like 12-channel electrocardiogram to wear around for a week. So that you can't do. I think they have 1 or 2 products like that they could send home with you right now. But like my aunt had a stroke or a seizure at our house, and she's since had a stroke. And I had a muse there, and she like left the house and drove, and I knew something was wrong, and like that was 3 years ago, and I think now I have the tools to at least like quickly look at her brain. But in 3 more years, I hope that it has a little meter like, careful, don't drive right now. And it should be something that her doctor gave her, not me, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the
Super.
yeah, patience.
That's awesome.
Shall I read a question from Alfredo? I guess it's for Alex. I guess it's for both, actually. I'll throw it in the mix. Can impulse control, in terms of impulsivity, in the additions domain, can that be targeted with efficiency and efficacy?
Well, I guess, yeah, like, I'm not specifically sure what with targeted with efficacy and efficiency. Well, there are different treatments certainly to target the sort of neural network and cortical networks that drive impulse, and there are biomarkers in terms of EEG phenotypes that have been discovered to be related to point impulse control and addiction, right? So I'm guessing that's what you meant. And in the answers, from a neurofeedback perspective, from an EEG perspective, certainly are phenotypes that we've studied and have isolated, identified. So therefore, they can be targeted in terms of feedback to sort of redirect and rewire the neural nets that are contributing to impulse control.
I think Josh is mentioning that. I think this is part of orbitofrontal anomalies. So it's in a place in the frontal cortex, I guess, right above your nose, that is responsible for impulsivity, according to the neuroscience literature, and probably capturing, oscillations in that area will help you hone in onto, a neurofeedback treatment or interventional pipeline that addresses this, I guess, with the efficacy.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great work done with pioneers of QEEG and neurofeedback, like Jay Gunkelman, who's looked at sort of incidence and phenotypes and addiction with CNS over-arousal, cingulate arousal, in terms of beta power or alpha theta power coupling to indicate over-arousal, which correlates positively to addiction, right, and obsessive compulsive behavior. So yeah, like I think treatment-wise, you look at those particular networks, the CNS, to target that, if that's what you meant.
I think that's what Alfredo meant, definitely.
Okay.
We do have a question from you, John. John, you.
Yeah, so this was a question for Alex, because he mentioned in the talk, you said you had a, I mean, firstly, super exciting times for you guys, right? Because just the last few months, even, you had like those 3 stages, so it was I don't know, you kind of quadrupled in size. But you said that you had a bunch of like research contracts and collaborations, and I was just curious, what kinds of research collaborations and what are you targeting here? Like, what's your ideal partners in various domains?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk generically. Obviously not all contracts are public domain knowledge. And what we have released is we have a contract, one of the contracts with Antheon, Biomedical, which is a biomedical pharma R&D company based out of Vancouver, British Columbia. And Antheon is on its journey to discover a novel DMT-based treatment for addiction, which is something that Alfredo just asked. So DMT has shown novel early effects to disrupt the neural net that is responsible for addictive behavior. So early literature suggested that it has efficacy to help things like substance-based addiction or impulse. And so one of our research collaboration with Antheon predicates on designing kind of study and collecting data, as well as building this machine learning model, as I showed before, to really kind of come up with a predictive model that can generate precise guidance in terms of dosing based on immersiveness, and using EEG as kind of a guiding compass, right? So that's generally the kind of stuff that we do. As I've mentioned, we have a team of neuroscientists, biomedical engineers, developers, and so on, to kind of bring a lot of these ideas into actual code, into frameworks and architecture, and realizing them. Right? So it's a very specific kind of data modeling and data analytics type of engagements that we do on the research side.
And I like the interventional aspect. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think many startups start with the technology and then go into insurance models and clinical models, and then they stop there. But again, many regulators, many subsidies and investors, they want to see the interventional aspect. So that's really promising. And then, Kali, what I like about Blueberry is that you do have geofencing, or you do have context-related, multimodal, capabilities in a device. Would you like to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah. We're working on a couple of kind of integrated modules that can be added to or work with the Blueberry. One is a camera ESP32 module that can continuously take pictures of everything that you're looking at, and then synchronize those with the database of your brain data. So then you can go back and look at your day kind of based off your brain activity or your heart rate at the time. We see this as a really useful tool for research and for users as well. The other thing we were working on was GPS tagging the data as well. So then you can create kind of maps of your day. Instead of mapping your heart rate throughout your walk, you can map your brain activity.
Amazing. I think many startups and many devices are tempted to have it in the same device, but it's quite unique to have both time fencing and geofencing and reconstruction of pictures or snapshots of your day. It's a bit futuristic, right? Is that an input from Steve Mann?
Yeah, that was certainly Steve Mann's influence. I went to visit him maybe 2 years ago now, and we started. He was already obviously been wearing a camera for 20 years now. The ability to synchronize that camera data with your brain data is really powerful. We were playing around with that with the Muse and EEG as well. But to upload it right into a database, like when I go back and look at my Google Photos, they're useful. It has a date attached and a time, but to have an extra aspect of tagging associated with them, we think is really important.
What stops the industry from doing that? Shouldn't that be, the technology is there for a long time. What stops the mainstream release of this technology?
Battery, I think, is one that's holding our whole world back. Our camera module is wired to an external battery pack because it wants to take pictures for as long as our Blueberry can record. It needs additional power. Same like the Muse, for example, too, that the amount of data they send is so small compared to what they would need to send for an image every couple minutes or a second or something. So I think that the bandwidth of our wireless communication and the battery capabilities is kind of holding back our society in a number of ways beyond this as well, like cars and everything. Yeah.
And data privacy as well, right?
I want to show what Josh is talking in the chat about. He's working on this kind of like multi-channel optical imaging device, which, speaking to that, you can imagine that would be very difficult to wirelessly transmit that kind of data in real time. So that's like a wired device, but why not imagine a future where it's not a wired device, and then start to build tools that are going to be ready for that?
Josh asks, I guess in relation with your previous bandwidth issue, what kind of Bluetooth version are you using? Is it 4.2? Is it 5?
I don't know.
BLE?
I don't know. I think it's the low energy Bluetooth. But
BLE 4 or 5? Got it. Josh, you got it. This is amazing. It's probably 4, it says. But yeah, but 5 would be higher throughput. I think with 5, probably you can think about streaming bigger data sets, and you know, it's probably something that Josh could comment on.
5G,
but yeah,
5G BCIs.
or that would use a lot of current. Yeah, John, you also had a question, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I was partly thinking about the future, right? This came up a few times, kind of things are looking futuristic in various ways. So one of the things that I kind of sense is kind of new and interesting about Alex's, what Alex, you guys are doing here is you're going for the ecosystem, right? You're going software service, algorithms, analytics, hardware agnostic, and thinking about platform at that level. So the question is kind of with tools like that, right? So imagine like we have Divergence Neuro platform, a bunch of interesting hardware devices, some other platforms that do interesting things, and maybe like partner with Divergence Neuro for kind of complementary capabilities. Like, are there any models for that kind of ecosystem in other areas of, tech or life? Like, is there anything we can take for how to think about where this can go in outside of this rather kind of new niche domain of neurotechnology?
Well, sure. I'll answer that in a sort of historical view and a contemporary view, if that's okay. So, the first thing that actually came to mind, a good friend of mine actually told me this not long ago, was the airline industry. So back in the 1920s, there are people that are here remember what happened to the old airline industry that used to have this mentality that they want to own every aspect of the operation. The end result of that was basically a disaster. They couldn't maintain end-to-end operation because it was getting so expensive. It required too many expertise for any single hegemony to manage and maintain. So as the industry itself went through this rebirth where it kind of steered towards a specialization. So your airline companies will own aircrafts and very, very sort of a high level kind of booking systems and operational systems around that. They would farm out, services, they'll farm out food, they'll farm out, terminal management, they'll farm out all these other aspects that are sort of critical or non-core as their operation, not non-critical. So you're kind of creating this sort of ecosystem whereby you're really kind of focusing on what your competitive advantage is and what you do great, which for us is certain integration and software engineering. And you're letting others that are great at focusing on their competitive advantage and their sort of expertise. For us, that would be hardware. We don't focus on hardware. We'll let somebody else focus on that, and they can build the best of breed hardware, which is integrated. So the modern airline industry is very modular, right? So airline companies own a few aircraft and crew and rotation, and that will be it. They farm out literally everything else, and it's much more successful. Now, when it comes to regulation, we still haven't cracked this, right? Because airline industry isn't the best example to use when it comes to regulation. So, the reform in terms of airline industry is looking at how do you transform this sort of quasi self-regulation to accountable public regulation, and I think the same thing would happen to Neuro. I think when you have a accountable, strong body of regulators around an industry that really would be held accountable and not just get their wrist slap because somebody forgot to update a quick important protocol, and the plane went down, and the company just gets a fine. I mean, that is not adequate regulation. I think the same thing could be looked at that way in Neuro. I think that decentralization and independent monitoring watchdog body and regulatory body will be essential in order for an effective and strong regulatory process to be set up. The other example would be more contemporary, would just be apps and hardware, right? So this right here, just because I make apps doesn't mean I have to lock into a specific hardware. I like Apple, but I also have an Android sitting around. I can run my app on multiple platforms, and vice versa. A platform contains many different applications. So each app vendor is in this sort of symbiotic relationship with their platform, in a sense that platform's power and reach is checked by the community. Even the powerhouses like Apple, not invulnerable to lawsuits and regulatory actions, as per recent cases Zynga versus Apple. You see this behemoth being checked in multiple ways by community, and that's the sign of an open and effective ecosystem at play, right? So
I want to pick on the same analogy that you made for the air industry, and then bring it back to the neurotech ecosystem. And then you were talking about flight regulators, typically that analyze guidelines and then checklists when an accident occurred. Would you like to transfer that analogy into neuroscience or neurotechnology and see who are the institutions responsible? And this is, I guess, a question for both of you. Who are the regulators in the neurotech industry? Who are the people responsible to sort of suggest, but also in a certain way impose the standards of the industry, so that everybody standardizes and adapts to them? And then why are they important, or how should that be regulated? Top down, bottom up? What's the dialogue? What's the ecosystem synergy there? Who are the regulators in neuroscience?
That's a very tough question.
Silence.
I'll take a crack at it and go with what I know. So in terms of taking a step back, in terms of just general health insurance and health data regulation, we have frameworks in the States dictated by HIPAA, and in Canada there's PROPITA. So these things are more sort of generic, oriented towards healthcare data, privacy related issues in terms of how to regulate data, how to regulate the usage of data, who has access, for how long, and how do we create this sort of audit trail that basically imbues it with transparency and processes to minimize possible damages in the worst events that data leaks or hacking or ransomware were to occur. So the government has certainly taken a major step from the 90s to push towards better regulation. That being said, I think there are specific issues in neuro that are not quite fully covered in Health Insurance Portability Act or a Canadian version of that. So I see it as kind of a step above that in terms of GDPR, privacy across Health Insurance Act. I think we need it's important to look at the role of independent regulatory body that are not sort of tightly coupled with industry, and the failure of airline regulatory body was the degree of which they're coupled. They're something called self-regulatory and self-assessment, and that's problematic in a couple ways. Where one, it's not arm's length, and two, the self-regulation doesn't compel the offenders with a punitive action that registers in the long term. So companies literally will set aside money for punitive actions, and they will account for it. And if the profit exceeds the punitive action, they will continue to do the same thing. So you're not looking at an effective enough kind of judiciary and independent regulatory body that would impose actions that will be consequential. So I think there's a gap there, perhaps, but I don't really know regulatory world that well. So I mean, that's.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, that's why we are here. And I also think there is a gap. And then I'm happy that we mentioned it in this podcast.
But what kind of thing, Alex, do you think would constitute a infraction? Is that the word I'm looking for?
So if my platform leaks somebody's phenotypical neural data, and then somebody else gets a hold of it and uses it in a way that manipulates or alters the course of that person's well-being or privacy or insurance rate in any way, shape, or form, I would, for example, consider that a major infraction, right? So yeah. It's privacy, it's data governance, it's data strategy overall. No amount of security is too much when it comes to being able to safeguard somebody's health information, let alone neuro health information. Things like neuroactivity patterns could be exploited in a way. Mm-hmm. From a behavioral perspective, I'm sure we'd all agree that not that we could particularly identify an individual by looking at the brainwave, but when the pattern is exposed, there's certain ways to really seriously cause harm, and create this sort of biodeterministic discriminative way to look at stratifying behavior, right? So there's a real dark side to this, kind of like what we would recall from Cambridge Analytica in 2018 was Facebook. It created this massive distorted view with artificial feedback that's introduced in the system that completely altered the course of a very significant event. So those kind of things will continue to happen if we left the industry itself to self-monitor, right? I mean, and the worst that happens is somebody go testify on a hill for 4 days and get their wrist slapped and say, "Well, I'm sorry, I will do better," and nothing changes, right? So,
but in that case, like the issue with, and I think the Cambridge Analytica analogy is a good one, but that in that case, it was less so a kind of security breach or, data leak or per se, but kind of contracts involving data sharing that were just not being regulated or overseen on people. There was definitely kind of ethical violations in terms of what they were allowing, but it was somewhat within the legal framework, right? You see what I mean? It's kind of more of a subtle infringement in that case. So I guess we think about the analogous thing for brain data, not like someone getting hacked, but if you sell your data to someone else, then
yeah. But also it's behavioral as a kind of slippery slope, behavioral classification leading to sort of a sense of biodeterminism. And I think there's a real dark side that we must be very cognizant about, when we talk about phenotypes, when we talk about, using EEG to understand and dissect neurocortical connectivity, to what degree do we imbue the sense of determinism and say, well, because your EEG looks like this and therefore you must be X, Y, and Z. There's a real danger to that, right? I think we mustn't be kind of, yeah.
I think it's a huge topic, and like with MRI structural images, you anonymize by cutting a piece of the face that you see in the volume of the MRI, but you cannot anonymize brain signatures, right? It's more difficult. So I think this is a topic that requires its own season of the podcast. We will afford this in season 2. Which is coming up, and then we want to have a deep discussion and delve deep into this topic, because I think it's requiring the right amount of reflections. So stay tuned on the podcast. We will have important guests on the side of data and data sharing, ownership and privacy, storage, transmission, bandwidth, and everything related to data. So, guys, this has been amazing. I love your questions and your drive, and then you were enticing the audience as well. There have been so many interesting questions, and I'm really happy of your contributions. Would you like to have one last questions to each other, say hi, exchange addresses.
Yes.
Cool.
Thanks to everyone for putting this together. It was excellent. I look forward to the next couple of weeks hearing more. Happy to hear more about what Divergence is doing.
Yeah, and then please be in touch. I want to close the meeting by saying that next week we also have an amazing guest, which is Joshua Brewster. He's going to speak about his own projects, he's the author of Edgeduino and many other interesting projects. He's also having a platform that goes in the direction of what we were speaking today. Maybe get in touch also with each other, but stay tuned. Same channel next week, Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Toronto time. Joshua Brewster is going to present. I will publish the announcement shortly. Guys, thumbs up. Really nice to speak with you. And then bye to everybody.
Likewise. Thanks so much. Goodbye.
See you guys soon.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone for coming.